In just 47 seconds, what began as Prince Harry's attempt to control his narrative transformed into a complete character assassination that left viewers stunned and the Duke of Sussex fleeing the studio in humiliation. The explosive confrontation with veteran journalist Diana Sawyer exposed a side of the prince that royal handlers have desperately tried to keep hidden, culminating in profanity-laced outbursts and accusations that shattered his carefully crafted victim persona live on national television. The tension was palpable from the moment Prince Harry entered the studio. Diana Sawyer, known for her unflinching approach to difficult interviews, had clearly done her homework. The set felt different tonight. The usual warm lighting replaced with stark, interrogation-style brightness that cast harsh shadows across the prince's face as he settled uncomfortably into the guest chair. "Your Royal Highness, thank you for joining us," Sawyer began, her tone professional but noticeably cooler than her typical celebrity greetings. "I understand you have quite a lot to say about your recent revelations." Harry shifted in his seat, his media-trained smile already showing cracks. "Well, Diana, I appreciate the opportunity to set the record straight. There's been so much misinformation circulating, and I think it's important that people hear the truth." Sawyer's eyes narrowed slightly, a predatory gleam that seasoned viewers would recognize as her preparation for the kill. "The truth, that's interesting, because we've been fact-checking some of your recent claims, and there are some rather glaring inconsistencies we need to discuss." The prince's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not sure what you mean by that, Diana. Everything I've shared has been my lived experience, my truth." "Your truth," Sawyer repeated, letting the phrase hang in the air like a challenge. "Let's start with something simple then. You've repeatedly claimed that you were cut off financially by your father, King Charles, after stepping back from royal duties. Yet our investigation shows you received substantial payments well into 2021, and you and Meghan had already secured multiple lucrative deals worth over $100 million. How do you reconcile that with your claims of being abandoned and left to fend for yourself?" Harry's composure began to crack. His voice took on that familiar, whiny quality that had become the subject of countless memes. "You don't understand the full picture, Diana. Yes, there were some payments, but they came with strings attached. Conditions. I was being controlled, manipulated." "Controlled how, exactly?" Sawyer interrupted, her voice sharp as a blade. "By being given millions of pounds and the freedom to live wherever you chose? By having your security paid for? By being allowed to keep your titles while simultaneously trashing the institution that granted them?" The studio audience, carefully selected for their mix of royal supporters and critics, stirred audibly. Several gasps echoed through the space as Sawyer's questions hit their mark. Harry's face flushed red, his carefully rehearsed talking points crumbling under the unexpected assault. "That's not your twisting things. The royal family has a history of controlling the narrative, of protecting themselves while throwing others under the bus. I've seen it firsthand." "Have you?" Sawyer leaned forward, her expression intensely focused. "Because what our viewers have seen is a pattern of you making increasingly dramatic claims that seem to evolve with each interview. First, it was about wanting privacy. Then it was about racism. Then it was about your mental health not being supported. Now it's about being financially cut off. Which story should we believe, Prince Harry?" The question hit like a physical blow. Harry's mouth opened and closed wordlessly for a moment, his media training failing him completely. The silence stretched uncomfortably as America watched the prince struggle to formulate a response that wouldn't further damage his credibility. "All of those things can be true simultaneously," he finally managed, his voice rising defensively. "Just because someone experiences multiple forms of trauma doesn't mean they're lying about any of it." Sawyer's expression remained impassive, but viewers could sense she was just getting started. "Trauma is a serious word, Your Royal Highness. Let's talk about real trauma for a moment. Our research team has been in contact with veterans organizations, particularly those who served alongside you in Afghanistan. They have some interesting perspectives on your recent claims about your military service." Harry's face went from red to ashen in seconds. His hands gripped the armrests of his chair so tightly his knuckles turned white. "What are you talking about? My service record speaks for itself." "Does it?" Sawyer's voice was deadly calm now. the tone of a prosecutor presenting evidence to a jury. "Because we have statements from soldiers who were there, Your Royal Highness. Soldiers who paint a very different picture from the combat hero narrative you've been promoting in your book and interviews." The prince's breath became visibly shallow, his chest rising and falling rapidly as panic set in. This wasn't going according to script. His handlers had prepared him for softball questions about healing and moving forward, not this forensic examination of his credibility. "Those soldiers don't know what they're talking about," Harry said, his voice cracking slightly. "I was there. I did my duty. I served my country." Behind reinforced walls, according to our sources, Sawyer continued relentlessly, playing video games and rarely leaving the base. "Yet you've claimed to have killed Taliban fighters and described your service in terms that actual combat veterans find deeply offensive." The studio fell silent, except for the uncomfortable sound of Harry's labored breathing. The carefully orchestrated PR rehabilitation tour was collapsing in real time, and everyone present could sense it. "You don't know what you're talking about," Harry repeated. But the words lacked conviction. His voice had taken on a desperate edge that made him sound less like a wronged prince and more like a cornered animal. Sawyer shuffled her papers deliberately, the sound amplified by the studio microphones. "We'll get back to that. But first, let's discuss your wife's claims about racism within the royal family. Claims that you've supported and amplified despite them being thoroughly debunked by multiple sources." Harry's eyes darted toward the exit, a movement so obvious that even viewers at home could see his fight-or-flight response kicking in. But Sawyer wasn't done with him yet, and the real demolition was just beginning. The veteran journalist had spent decades perfecting the art of the surgical interview takedown, and Prince Harry was about to discover that his celebrity status and victim narrative provided no protection against someone who actually knew how to ask the hard questions. As the commercial break approached, viewers could sense they were witnessing something unprecedented: the complete unraveling of a carefully constructed public persona, live on national television. What happened next would leave the prince with no choice but to abandon all pretense of royal dignity. The commercial break lasted exactly 90 seconds, but for Prince Harry, it felt like an eternity. Viewers watching at home could see him frantically whispering to his handlers off-camera, his face a mask of barely contained panic. When the cameras rolled again, Sawyer's expression had somehow become even more predatory. "We're back," she announced, her voice cutting through the studio tension like a scalpel. "Prince Harry, before the break, we were discussing the inconsistencies in your various public statements. But now, I want to address something that I think gets to the heart of who you really are." Harry's Adam's apple bobbed as he swallowed hard. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Diana." "I'm not implying anything. I'm stating facts." Sawyer pulled out a thick folder that seemed to materialize from nowhere. "We've obtained recordings from your time in rehab, interviews with former staff members from Kensington Palace, and perhaps most damning of all, testimony from charities that worked with you before your dramatic exit from royal life." The color drained completely from Harry's face. His carefully styled hair was beginning to show sweat at the temples, and his designer shirt was visibly damp under the studio lights. "Those are private matters. You have no right to what? To tell the truth?" Sawyer's interruption was swift and merciless, because what these sources reveal is a pattern of behavior that contradicts everything you've been selling to the American public. Temper tantrums, verbal abuse of staff, and a level of entitlement that would make even the most privileged celebrity blush. Harry's hands began to tremble visibly. "That's complete bullshit," he snapped, the profanity slipping out before he could stop himself. The outburst sent a ripple of shocked murmurs through the studio audience. Sawyer's eyebrows raised slightly, but her composure remained unshaken. "Language, Your Royal Highness. Though I suppose that outburst rather proves my point about your temper." She opened the folder deliberately. "Should I read some direct quotes from your former protection officers? Or perhaps testimony from charity workers who described your behavior as absolutely appalling during what were supposed to be compassionate visits?" "You're lying," Harry said, his voice rising to an almost shrill pitch. "This is exactly what they do. They plant stories. They manipulate. They—" Sawyer pounced on the word like a hawk on prey. "Who is they, Prince Harry? Because right now, the only person manipulating anyone is you. You've built an entire brand around being the victim, the outcast, The poor little prince who was so mistreated. But the evidence suggests you were actually the problem. The studio fell deathly quiet. Even the camera operators seemed to hold their breath as Harry's carefully constructed facade began to crumble in real time. His breathing became audible through the microphones, short and rapid like someone on the verge of a panic attack. "You want to know the real reason you left England?" Sawyer continued, her voice now carrying the authority of someone delivering a verdict. "It wasn't racism. It wasn't media harassment. It wasn't even about protecting your wife. It was because you couldn't handle being the spare, could you? You couldn't stand living in your brother's shadow for the rest of your life." "Shut the fuck up!" Harry exploded, half rising from his chair before catching himself. The second profanity echoed through the studio like a gunshot, causing several audience members to gasp audibly. "You don't know anything about my life, about what I've been through." "I know more than you think," Sawyer replied coolly, completely unfazed by his outburst. "I know about the jealousy, the resentment, the constant need for attention that drove you to betray your own family for Netflix money and book deals. I know about the way you've weaponized your mother's memory to justify your actions." At the mention of his mother, Harry's face contorted with rage. "Don't you dare bring her into this. Don't you fucking dare." "Why not?" Sawyer's voice remained steady, professional, devastating. "You bring her into everything. Every interview, every grievance, every justification for your behavior comes back to Diana. But here's what you don't want people to know. She would be ashamed of what you've become." The words hit Harry like physical blows. His mouth fell open in shock, his eyes wide with a mixture of fury and devastation. You can't say that. You didn't know her." "I interviewed her, actually, multiple times. And the Diana I knew would never have aired her family's private business for profit. She would never have used her children as weapons against their father. She certainly wouldn't have run away to America and spent years trashing the institution she once served." Sawyer leaned forward, her voice dropping to barely above a whisper, but still perfectly audible. "Your mother was many things, Prince Harry, but she wasn't a coward." The studio atmosphere became electric with tension. Harry looked like he was about to either throw a punch or collapse entirely. His hands were shaking uncontrollably now, and sweat was visibly beading on his forehead. "That's enough," he managed to choke out, his voice barely recognizable. "This interview is over." "Is it?" Sawyer's smile was sharp as broken glass. "Because we haven't even gotten to the best part yet. We haven't discussed your wife's first marriage, or the real reason she left Canada, or the interesting financial arrangements she made before ever meeting you." Harry's face went from red to purple. "I said that's enough. Or should we talk about the book deal negotiations that started before you even announced your departure from royal duties? The Netflix meetings that happened while you were still supposedly serving the crown?" Sawyer's voice rose slightly, matching his energy but maintaining her professional demeanor. "The evidence suggests this whole victim narrative was planned, calculated, designed to maximize profit while minimizing accountability." "You're a fucking liar," Harry screamed, fully standing now, his chair scraping loudly against the studio floor. "This is harassment. This is exactly the kind of shit that drove my mother to her death." The accusation hung in the air like poison gas. Sawyer's expression hardened, and for the first time in the interview, genuine anger flashed across her features. "Don't you dare," she said, her voice low and dangerous, "use your mother's death to shield yourself from legitimate questions about your choices. That's beneath even you." But Harry was beyond reason now, beyond the careful media training and royal protocol that had governed his entire life. The mask had finally, completely slipped, revealing something ugly and desperate underneath. As he stood there, trembling with rage and humiliation, viewers could see exactly what palace insiders had always known but never dared say publicly. The confrontation had reached its breaking point, and what happened next would be replayed on social media for years to come. Harry's chest heaved as he stood trembling beside his overturned chair, his face a mottled combination of rage and humiliation. The studio audience sat in stunned silence, phones discreetly recording what was quickly becoming the most explosive celebrity meltdown in television history. Diana Sawyer remained seated, her composure intact, watching the prince's complete psychological collapse with the detached fascination of a scientist observing a chemical reaction. "Sit down, Prince Harry," Sawyer said quietly, her voice carrying an authority that cut through his hysteria. You're embarrassing yourself. Embarrassing myself? Harry's voice cracked as he laughed maniacally. You've been ambushing me for the past hour with lies and bullshit, and you think I'm embarrassing myself? This is exactly what they warned me would happen. This is why we had to leave. They warned you? Sawyer's eyebrows arched with genuine curiosity. Who warned you exactly? Because based on our investigation, the only people who had concerns about your behavior were trying to help you, not hurt you. Your father offered you counseling. Your brother tried multiple interventions. Even your grandmother attempted to provide guidance before she died. The mention of Queen Elizabeth hit Harry like a sledgehammer. His face crumpled momentarily before hardening into something ugly and desperate. Don't you dare bring her into this. She supported my decision to leave. She understood that you were having a breakdown, Sawyer interrupted ruthlessly. We have palace sources who confirm she was heartbroken by your betrayal. That in her final months, she referred to your actions as the greatest disappointment of her reign. That's a fucking lie, Harry screamed, spittle flying from his mouth. She loved me. She understood what I was going through. What you were going through. Sawyer's voice rose for the first time, matching his energy with controlled fury. You mean being given every privilege imaginable? Having your mistakes covered up? Your debts paid? Your scandals buried? What exactly were you going through that justified betraying everyone who ever loved you? Harry's response was incoherent, a mixture of sobs and curse words that made him look less like royalty and more like a spoiled child having the ultimate tantrum. His handlers in the wings were making frantic gestures, but it was too late to salvage anything from this disaster. You want to know what really happened? Sawyer continued, pulling out a final document from her folder. We spoke to your therapist from 2019. Professional confidentiality prevents us from sharing details, but they did confirm that your issues weren't about family trauma or media pressure. They were about narcissistic personality traits and an inability to accept responsibility for your actions. You can't do that, Harry shrieked, his voice breaking completely. That's privileged information. I'll sue you. I'll sue this entire fucking network. With what money? Sawyer's smile was predatory. Because we also spoke to financial analysts who reviewed your public filings. Despite all your lucrative deals, you're hemorrhaging money. The Montecito mansion, the security costs, the legal fees from all your lawsuits. You're burning through cash faster than you can earn it. The revelation hit the studio like a bomb. Harry's face went from purple to gray as the implications sank in. His entire narrative about financial independence and success was crumbling along with everything else. That's not true, he stammered, but the conviction was gone from his voice. We're doing fine. The deals are underperforming, Sawyer cut him off. Netflix is reportedly unhappy with your content. Spotify canceled your contract. The book sales have plateaued. And now, after tonight's performance, I suspect your speaking engagements will dry up too. Harry stood swaying slightly, looking like a man who had just realized he was standing on quicksand. The fight seemed to drain out of him all at once, replaced by something far more pathetic, the dawning recognition of his own complete failure. This isn't over, he said weakly. But even he seemed to know how hollow the threat sounded. Actually, it is, Sawyer replied with finality. Because what viewers have seen tonight is the real Prince Harry. Not the victim, not the wounded son, not the misunderstood royal. They've seen a spoiled, entitled man who threw away everything meaningful in his life for money and attention, and who has nothing left now but rage and delusion. Harry's mouth opened and closed soundlessly. His handlers were now openly signaling for him to leave, their carefully laid PR strategy in complete ruins. The prince looked around the studio, as if seeing it clearly for the first time, the cameras capturing every moment of his breakdown, the audience staring at him with a mixture of pity and disgust, the host who had systematically destroyed his credibility with surgical precision. Fuck this, he muttered finally, his voice barely audible. Fuck all of this. He stumbled toward the exit, his legs unsteady beneath him. But Sawyer wasn't finished with her final blow. Prince Harry, she called after him, her voice carrying clearly across the silent studio. Your mother would be ashamed. Harry stopped dead in his tracks. For a moment, It looked like he might turn around and charge at her. Instead, he let out a sound that was part sob, part scream, and bolted for the exit like a wounded animal seeking shelter. The studio doors slammed behind him with a resounding crash that echoed through the space like a gunshot. Diana Sawyer turned back to face the camera, her composure completely restored, not a hair out of place despite having just orchestrated one of the most devastating takedowns in television history. "Well," she said calmly, straightening her papers, "I think that tells us everything we need to know about the Duke of Sussex." When confronted with facts instead of sympathy, when asked real questions instead of softball interviews, the mask comes off completely. She paused, letting the weight of what had just transpired settle over the audience. Tonight, viewers have witnessed the complete collapse of a carefully constructed public persona. They've seen what happens when someone who has spent years playing the victim is finally held accountable for their choices. And perhaps most importantly, they've seen why sometimes the institution knows better than the individual. The camera held on Sawyer's composed face for a long moment before cutting to commercial, leaving viewers across America stunned by what they had just witnessed. Within minutes, clips of Harry's meltdown were trending on every social media platform, his screaming face and incoherent rants becoming instant meme material. The prince's carefully orchestrated rehabilitation tour was over before it had really begun, destroyed in a single interview that revealed the ugly truth beneath the polished surface. Diana Sawyer had done what the British press, the royal family, and even Harry's own conscience had failed to do. She had shown the world exactly who Prince Harry really was when stripped of his titles, his victim narrative, and his delusions of righteousness. The interview would be remembered as the moment when America stopped buying what Harry was selling and started seeing him for what he truly was: a broken man who had destroyed everything good in his life and had nothing left to offer but bitterness and blame. It was, by any measure, a complete and total humiliation.